Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for inviting me to be with you here this morning. It is a pleasure to share some ideas and strategies with you. In my career, I have the fortune of traveling the world and working with real estate agencies, technology companies, strategic development groups all around the world. And part of my goal today is to share with you some best practices that we are seeing in terms of expanding your markets, connecting with consumers, and creating delightful experiences. Some of the ideas I will share with you, you may already be experimenting with, and some of the ideas may be new. And what I hope to do is give you both a strategy and some specific examples of ways in which you can meet the expectations of today's consumer as well as tomorrow's consumer. As much as possible, I have tried to find examples that pertain specifically throughout France and Europe, but we have some American examples, some Canadian examples, and I want to give you a global perspective of what's happening in the world of technology. The most important question to ask yourself, whether you are a broker, whether you are a technologist, whether you are a leader, is what your plan for delight is. Not just meeting information expectations, but for creating a delightful experience. The most successful brands in the world today are focused on creating a relationship built around surprise, built around delight, and built around service. And in many ways, some of the things that we're doing in technology and marketing are focused on delight, but in some ways, they're actually too focused on information and not enough focused on experience. So I challenge you to think in terms beyond just the technology. I also want to share with you some quick information with respect to your particular consumer, the French consumer. There is a new study from McKinsey on the projection of French economy through 2030. And this is not a lot of statistics. I have really two critical pieces of information for you. The first, that as you look out over the next 15 years, your society will be very evenly split between people over the age of 55 and under the age of 55. This is important from a marketing standpoint because the expectations of those two groups of consumers are significantly different in many ways. It also means that when you design technology, you have to keep in mind that the marketing and the access point has to work for people who may have grown up with a different skill set than the people in the younger cohort, especially since the wealth will remain in the older cohort for many years to come. The good news is that all projections indicate strong and stable growth in the housing sector throughout France. And that's important because this gives you both projection for your industry, but projection for the society in general around the interest in real estate, around the engagement, and also with respect to the kind of design that you'll need to use to create great experiences. So we start always today by asking what kinds of experiences consumers want now and how they will impact the future. And the four most important criteria are generally different than we would find in the industry today. The first is to increase easiness. Today's consumer wants ease more than anything else. In fact, many of the surveys indicate that they would prefer easy over complete, and we'll talk about that in a moment. High quality is a challenge for us. While we have spent a lot of time improving the marketing technology, we focused on distribution of information, we really need to now focus on the quality of the information. The consumer also wants us to anticipate what they're looking for, not just solve the problem when they ask for help, but to put them in the fast lane before they ask for help. And finally, they want to collaborate, not just in the servicing and the marketing of their property, but they want to actually collaborate with your brand. And what we'll see is that today's best technologies give the consumer an opportunity to be part of the brand experience, even when they're not actively buying or selling a property. I want to start with a really simple story, though, because at the outset, it's really important to think of a day-to-day experience for the consumer. I'll start with a very simple experience from last week. Last week, before coming here, I decided to get a haircut. Now, the place that I normally get a haircut, and I know there's not much hair left to cut, but the place that I normally get a haircut has an app. And we've been so focused on apps for the past 5 years that everybody expects the app to do everything. And yet, while this app told me where they were located, what hours they operated, told me the services they provide, it was impossible to do the simplest thing, which was to book an appointment. Meanwhile, down the street was a very old-fashioned barber, just a man who cuts hair and shaves. That's all he does. He doesn't have an app, but he has a smartphone. And I simply sent him a text and said, "Do you have any openings this afternoon for me to get a haircut?" Now, you would think that the app was supposed to increase the likelihood of me working with that company. But because it hadn't anticipated the easy aspect of booking an appointment, I actually didn't go to the salon. I went instead to the barber because he simply responded with a simple text that said 2 o'clock. Now, this is a metaphor because in the marketing world, we get very excited about technology. We get excited about developing things that everyone is developing, when sometimes the best technology is something what everyone has already. And so I challenge you to think about the end user experience, not just what we can do with new technology, but the simplest thing we can do. Because at the end of the day, the barber booked the appointment because he used text, a technology that's old, simple, but ubiquitous. And the company with the app had never actually thought through what a daily experience was like for their users. So how will you increase easy when it comes to your marketing? Well, consider there are 2 aspects of easy that all of us are faced with. The first is that we need to be found by the consumer. And the second is that we need them to find our inventory. Now, we think, in many ways, that we've solved this problem, but the game is constantly changing. First, we need to fully recognize that 50% or more of all searches today are done on mobile devices. This is a completely different approach to development for marketing in the future. No longer can we sit down with design and start from the big screen and then add to the little screen later. We must start from the mobile screen first. Secondly, we also have to understand that the vast majority of mobile search is actually done at home. So we like to think that they need mobile when they're on the road, when they're on the go. But the truth is that most of the mobile search, if you look in the upper right-hand corner of this chart, more than 55% of the mobile search is done in the house. This means the preferred method of accessing our inventory, ourselves, our products, our services is a mobile device in the kitchen, in the living room, and throughout the house. So we have to change our expectations for where our mobile devices will be used, and we need to design around that experience. We also need to notice that there are some major trends occurring in Europe with respect to the kinds of mobile devices. How many people in the audience right now have an Android-based mobile device? An Android-based mobile device. How many people have an iPhone or iOS mobile device? What's most remarkable, and obviously about 75% of the room has an Apple-based device. What's most remarkable is that throughout Europe, we mostly see the greatest gains still in Apple devices. Now, what does this mean? Well, this is important because year over year, quarter over quarter, as more people convert to Apple-based systems, it changes the nature for marketers of our strategy. We used to think that developing search strategies was all about getting found in Google and in major search portals. Unfortunately, as we look at what's really happening with the consumer, their increasing use of Apple products means they're actually changing how they perform searches. How many people have conducted a voice-based search on their smartphone, a voice-based search? And we're starting to see a very large increase in voice-based search. The number one reason is because it's very difficult to type on these devices. No matter what they do, it's too difficult to type. But the voice is natural, the voice is easy, and the voice will also be integrated into our automobiles, into our houses, into our day-to-day experience. The challenge is that as you increase your use of technology convenience tools, such as Siri, it changes the search strategy. No longer is it sufficient just to be found in Google. All voice searches now are getting far more complex in their sources of information. In fact, on Apple devices, Google is not necessarily one of the preferred locations for search. The default is Bing, a search engine that most of us have forgotten about or thought didn't matter anymore. The default for location searches is Yelp, not necessarily Google Maps or Google Directories. And more importantly, these devices are reaching deeper into social for information, which is an area that in many ways we never thought was about search. We anticipated it as networking, but we didn't anticipate it as search. To give you an example, before coming here, I simply held up my phone and asked Siri the following question: show me real estate companies near the Eiffel Tower. A simple question. You'll notice on the left-hand side that the search, which is completed through Bing, actually gets us results that are not necessarily the results you would find on Google and would not be influenced by how much content you have off of your website. In fact, the second search result, I think, is the most interesting. The fact that Airbnb is listed as the second search result radically changes our concept of with whom we are competing. On the right-hand side, you'll notice that results also include videos, and at the bottom, they included Twitter. This means that the search strategy, when driven by a convenience tool like voice, must expand greatly. It is no longer about how many articles are on your website, how many downloadable documents are on your website, how much long tail you think you're going to find. It is about the breadth of search, not just the depth of search. It also means that your competitor is no longer just another broker in the same town, same region, or even the same country. Because Airbnb is a global competitor that can find the second search spot in a local search. This dramatically changes what it means for you to be found. But once you are found, once you increase your presence in Yelp and Bing and Twitter, and you increase the likelihood of being found by mobile search, you also need to rethink how people search for homes. One of the most dramatic changes we've seen around the world in search is that people have started to shift from data search to lifestyle search. Now, lifestyle search traditionally is communicated to our broker. We say to our broker the things we like, the preferences we have, the way we live. But now consumers want lifestyle search to happen on their smartphones in real time. Here's an example. Most real estate search today is built around the concept of a database. Every portal in the world is essentially a database, built by engineers with a search function designed by technologists. But most human beings don't actually think that way when they buy a house. When they buy a house, they think about emotional things as much as they think about technical things. This is why search is actually evolving to take a totally different approach to how people will find their next home. Throughout Europe, Canada, Australia, and America, we are seeing search that's actually beginning with an interview as opposed to a search form. For example, some places, like this particular website, begin by asking people questions about their life, not about their house. On the left-hand side, it asks, where do you like to shop? And it lists common places that you would buy food. On the right-hand side, it asks you what your favorite weekend activity is. Bicycling, festivals, going to the bar, staying at home. It then asks questions like, how do you use your home? Just for sleeping, I work from home, I entertain, and so on. As a result of answering 4 simple quizzes, the system then will search the inventory and find the houses that are best suited to the lifestyle, not necessarily the bedrooms, the baths, and the price. And everybody in this room who has ever sold a house knows that this is exactly how people buy a home. They tell you what they think they want in terms of data, but they buy in terms of emotion. And so by mobilizing the emotion to the front of the search, you radically change the engagement with the consumer. But if you really want to make it easy, you can think about some of the most imaginative things, many of the things that you'll see in the trade show, the most imaginative cutting-edge ideas that ultimately shrink the distance between the virtual marketing space and the real world. For example, you may remember that Google tried for a while to launch a pair of glasses through which you could look at the world, conduct searches, find information, take photographs, etc. Now, this was essentially an experiment. If you think about it, they really weren't interested in all of us wearing glasses like robots and walking around the world. And the reason is simple. If you walk out into the expo right now, you will see half the people speaking to people and half the people looking at their phone. And what they discovered is that nobody is looking up. Everyone is looking down. That the phone had already created the device that people wanted, and that glasses made no sense. But the technology itself could be repurposed. So if the glasses concept wasn't going to work, how could the technology be used for search? There's a company in New York City that has done an excellent job at merging these two. But rather than asking the consumer to wear some strange device, they simply took the phone and they turned it into a set of glasses. At Douglas Elliman, what they've actually done is created an application that allows you to hold it up in any spot in the city and simply move across and see the listings that appear in any building in the city. And when you see a listing you like, you may quickly tap it and flip through. It works in the countryside the same way, where you can hold the phone up in front of a house and literally go through an interactive listing sheet. This technology was Google Glasses, but simplified to the device that everybody has. It is the same thing that the barber understood that the salon did not. That people didn't want to download another application. They didn't want to learn another set of menus. They wanted to use something they already had to simplify the process. So imagine how search is completely different, because people are searching by physical space, by emotional space, and then by technical space. Now, if all of this seems too fancy, if all of this seems far too fetched for us right now, I would recommend that the starting point is at the basics. there are still some basics around the world that I think we have a lot of work to do in. There are still some fundamental ways to engage consumers that we're not quite yet working at optimal efficiency. Those basics are to have high-quality information, starting with great photographs. Yesterday, as I walked around the center of Paris, I walked by many real estate offices who had in the window printouts of their listings. Now, first of all, why there isn't a television screen in the window amazes me to this day. But if you are going to have printouts, let's at least agree that the quality of the photos should be print-worthy. They should be high-quality images, and that the text accompanying them does marketing work, not just informational work. And that, for a change, we'll do what they do on television. We'll tell a story by making a movie, which we call a commercial, not just a slideshow. And lastly, when they do contact us, we'll respond quickly. Now, the two items in yellow I'm going to reserve for the second discussion I'll have this afternoon in terms of selling, not data. But I do want to talk for a moment about high quality, and I do want to talk a little bit about responsiveness. First of all, keep in mind that whatever you're not showing is as much of a challenge to the consumer as what you are showing. So when you think about listings online, any listing that has a limited number of low-quality photographs immediately creates suspicion and concern in the mind of the consumer. Why am I not seeing more? What is not being shown to me? Why didn't they take time to do it? And I really want to point out that it's not so much about the buyer. I know that we're very consumed by the buyer, but the truth is that every marketing tool you have is about the seller. Every listing you have today is a way to get a future listing. And so the way in which your listings appear today are actually signaling future sellers what they would expect tomorrow. More importantly, the descriptions that we see today still remain largely in the world of facts. And again, none of us buy products on facts. We don't buy our clothes based on the facts, we don't buy our automobiles based on the facts, and we most certainly do not buy our homes on the facts. We buy on emotion. Here's a very simple example. In this particular case, it's a very high-quality photograph. It's done very tastefully. There are 5 of them that give us perspective of the room. But if you read the bottom, it's just facts. There's no storytelling involved. We're simply talking about rooms and square meters and basic information. Even terms like beautiful, contemporary, panoramic, and sea view are not necessarily anything more than facts. They give us no sense of living there, no sense of playing there, no sense of relaxing there, no sense of entertaining there. So at a very basic sense, it's important to understand that distribution is no longer a challenge. The quality of what's distributed is the challenge. And I would say that there is a great opportunity space, a great big space in which nobody is doing storytelling in real estate. They're simply speaking the facts again and again. But you could tell the story, or better yet, you could let the seller tell the story. Some of the best companies around the world have discovered that modern sellers want to participate. They certainly tell their friends their house is for sale. They certainly give you information about the house for sale, but they're more willing than ever to participate in the sale. For example, an international brokerage, Coldwell Banker, actually makes it possible for all of their sellers to log in and add their own stories about the property. More importantly, they can also add their own photographs of the property. So on one hand, while we're challenged to write better stories and take better photos, many companies have discovered that the seller may have the right story and the right photo. They have the stories about what it's like to live there, to enjoy the property, and to have been in it for a while. And there are companies that have lowered the border, lowered the distance between what they're doing and how the seller can participate. they're also discovering that sellers have spheres of influence which can be tapped into for marketing. So if the seller can be encouraged to participate, they also can share the marketing. Sharing the marketing is good for finding the buyer, but it is also good for getting the next seller. We all like a testimonial. We all like to be referred from our last seller to our next seller. The easiest way to do that is to let your seller tell their sphere of influence on Facebook, on Twitter, on Pinterest, not only that the house is available, but to connect them through to you. So this is a strategy that uses collaboration to create future inventory for you. If you do it right, you will certainly create inquiries. You will create requests for information, for showings, and ultimately for offers. The challenge there is no longer whether we respond by email, but how quickly we respond. At the end of the day, if the goal is to focus on the relationship, not the lead, then there's only one factor above all else that matters. And that factor is speed. Nothing makes a greater impression on the consumer today than the speed with which we respond. Now, many of us would like to think that because we have the listing, we can take our time to respond. But what we know is that consumers today are checking multiple sites at once. And we also know that right here in the trade show, there are services that may have your property on multiple sites at once. So the idea that we can take our time is actually undermined by our own distribution strategy. We've raised the challenge on ourselves, and the only thing that matters is speed. The speed to respond gives you a great advantage not only over the competition, but in building the relationship. In fact, when we look at all other areas in which consumers want response, we see that speed matters. But I don't want to use the word consumer as if they weren't you, because you're the same consumer. When you want help, you don't want to have to wait for a phone call. You don't want to have to wait for a return message. In fact, if you're using social media, you expect a very short window of response. How many people in this room have used social media to solve a problem with an air flight, with a hotel, with some difficulty in purchasing? We use social media to give feedback and request assistance. And as you can see, not only do we expect it fast, but we reward the companies that perform faster. 1/3 of people are more likely to buy from a company that responds quickly. And at the bottom here, 42% are willing to praise or recommend that company. No matter where I go around the world, the lifeblood of real estate is the referral. If you want to be praised, if you want to be referred, the easiest thing to do is to be fast. Now, one way to be fast is also to be mobile. And while we think that emailing quickly and certainly responding by text is a strategy, we also need to rethink the entire physical experience of mobile. A fast service response starts by what information we put at the fingers, or more importantly, at the thumb of the consumer. And this is important because we are still a long way from optimizing the logic of the device. The handheld device is not just a small screen for a large laptop or computer. In fact, it has physically altered how we work in the world. A simple story. About 1 month ago, I was in the airport, and after a very long day, I actually did something very old-fashioned. I bought a printed newspaper. I decided that I had been looking at my smartphone too much that day. As I was waiting in line, I had the newspaper folded in half, and I was reading down the left-hand side of the paper. And when I got to the bottom of the paper, I noticed that my thumb was automatically moving along the side of the paper. My body had already physically learned that the way to get to the next story was to move your thumb, not to turn the paper over or to turn the page. Why is this important? Because if you go to your website today on your mobile device, if it can't be operated by just a thumb, you are neither increasing easy nor increasing fast. Here's another example from right here in France. This is Century 21's mobile optimized website. Now, what does mobile optimized mean? It really doesn't mean that it fits nicely on the screen. Anybody can do that. It means that it fits nicely in the palm of your hand and uses the logic of the handheld. When you're looking at photographs on this site, in order to see the next one, you flick your thumb. You don't tap an arrow to go right or left. You don't turn it sideways. You don't scroll up or scroll down or pinch. The handheld has its own logic. And to make it simple, you have to follow the rules of the body, not just the rules of the technology. And so I want you to think about the way in which you increase access by ensuring that your technology corresponds to the physical world as well. And think about all of the things a mobile device can do that other technology cannot. Most importantly, putting people in the fast lane. We all prefer to be in the priority lane at the airport, at a toll booth, at a hotel. We want to be checked in fast, and we want to check out quickly. If you purchase at some stores now, they'll simply allow you to buy the product right there in the department store without having to go to a register. It's all about fast. But it's also about social. Every time the speed increases, we have something good to say. And this is an area of marketing that I think we also can do some good work in. I also believe that there's a large gap here in which you can easily create competitive advantages. For starters, the time we spend on social media continues to grow every year. This is just a global chart from the We Are Social research firm. And the arrow will point out to you France, which spends about 2 hours typically every day on social media. For some of us in this room, it's probably more. In fact, there are some people here right now who haven't been paying attention to me at all and have been on Twitter the entire time. But when you think about it, our consumption of social media is a marketing channel. It's something that isn't just about having our say or interacting with our peers. It's about a way in which we consume. Now, everybody likes to talk about Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube or Twitter. But I actually think the real estate industry has a unique opportunity in a social network that isn't necessarily top of mind and getting a lot of use. So I want to speak to you not about those networks, which have been around for a while and you probably know how to use quite well. I want to talk about the competitive advantages of Instagram. Because many of us see Instagram as a place where we'll take a selfie and post it online. But some brands are doing amazing work at creating a collaborative experience with Instagram. And this has something to do with the theory that was proposed by Google known as the micro moment. The consumer journey from the interest in buying a home to completing the purchase or sale of a home is not actually a single event. It's a series of small micro moments. These moments can happen at any hour of the day, they can happen at any location, and they don't always happen directly with us. They happen with real estate in general and with the concept of buying or selling. And these micro moments are places that we find it very difficult to influence in typical marketing mediums, like an e-newsletter or a website. But social media is perfectly designed for micro moments. Now, let me take you back a few years to a really strong brand that thought that its first attempt at social micro moments was the way to do this. Louis Vuitton had began about 3.5 years ago with an application that they called Amble. Amble was a specific brand application that you would download as a consumer of Louis Vuitton. Now, it had two particular goals in mind. One was to obviously put the inventory of Louis Vuitton in your hand so that you could make an impulse purchase. But two, they wanted the consumers of Louis to engage in the actual brand marketing collaboratively. Now, this particular application was very simple. All they wanted people to do was to go around famous locations with their Louis and take a photo of themselves with the bag, with the product, and share it online. In fact, they got some celebrities to do this very thing in which they called a journey or an amble, and we wanted to be like the celebrities. What Louis Vuitton discovered was that people were very, very excited about participating in the brand because we like to show off the brands that we have, and we like to tell others that we're part of the brand. We live vicariously through our brands. What they hadn't thought about, however, was that the way people participate is not directly with their brands. They are advocates of their brands, but not directly to the brand. They are indirectly advocates through social media. Because along came Instagram and completely changed how Louis Vuitton would be supported by their customers. So we think of the same challenge for us. We want people to come to our website. We want them to come back often. We want them to receive our email. We want them to be our friend on Facebook or follow us on Twitter. But we're trying to get them to connect with us rather than advocate for us. And the difficulty is, nobody really wants to hang out with their real estate broker. They like their real estate broker, they respect their professionalism, but they really don't want to hang out with their real estate broker. But they do want to talk about buying and selling and, when necessary, their particular agent. They like to recommend us, they don't necessarily want to hang out with us. So back to our Louis Vuitton story. What they didn't anticipate was that social media would actually eliminate the need for their brand. In fact, today, you can't download the Amble app anymore because it's not necessary to support the brand. Today, you can simply follow Louis on Instagram, or even if you don't follow them on Instagram, you can post a photo with your Louis on Instagram and use the hashtag. Now, one benefit of this approach is that they could never have collected 7 million users of their application. It would never have happened. But by moving the strategy away from a proprietary relationship to a socially collective relationship, they increased the number of people who would support them. They also found, which we would say in real estate is the golden goose, they found great brand fans. These are advocates of our brand that are not paid by us, that don't coordinate with us. They simply love what we're doing enough to tell others about us. This is an example of a woman who loves fashion. She is Brazilian. She lives in Germany. And she has 21,000 followers, as you can see at the bottom. And every day, she is faithfully putting a photograph of her Louis and herself on Instagram. There is no marketing budget that can find this woman. There is no application that can find this woman. She may and may not be known to the brand, but she is an advocate for them to her sphere of influence, which is 21,000 people. Now consider for yourself, do you have 21,000 emails? Do you have 21,000 visitors to your website in a year? Or can you find or create advocates, raving fans who will support you by using something they do naturally, which is a social network? But why Instagram? Why not Facebook or Twitter? Well, one of the reasons is that visual is simple. Everybody knows how to create content with a camera. They may not know how to post or create an engaging Facebook or Twitter message, but they know how to take a photo for themselves. And this created an entire world of semi-professional marketers for this particular brand. We also know that Instagram has a very high percentage of interaction with its followers. So this is a simple comparison between Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And in the case of Instagram, volume is less important because they have a very high percentage of people who will see and engage the posting over every other social network out there. So while we're so busy trying to get followers on Facebook who rarely see us and rarely interact with us, what we can find is that a smaller number of people on a network like Instagram can have a higher optimal result. So when you think about micro moments, you'll notice that they meet all of the criteria for our delightfulness. They're simple because they use a camera. They're easy because they're done on a day-to-day basis. They're personal because they're not about data. You'll never see someone Instagramming the facts or the figures of their photograph. And they're vicarious. They allow people to support their brand without necessarily having to repeat marketing information. And mostly, they're not advertising, which is one great way in which we can change the nature of competition in creating delightful experiences. If you look all across Instagram, you will find people who don't need to use advertising to create engagement. In this particular example, Miss Cool Pics is the name of the user. Every day, all she does is post ordinary street moments. She does like to use her cat, which is a very good strategy, since cats secretly run the internet. But mostly, she finds ways to engage with people's emotion. You will never find 2,700 people who like a kitchen or a bedroom or a bathroom. But you may find 2,700 people who will interact with a street scene that you can create. Now you might ask yourself, does this actually create sales? Well, in addition to my job as a speaker and as a thinker, I'm also an amateur photographer. So I particularly am drawn to this medium. But I have the same problem you do. I have to sell, and I have a limited number of sales a year. But the very same phenomenon that works by creating ordinary experiences to inspire can create sales. Just as a simple example, recently I was teaching in New York City and had a chance to spend lunch at the top of the Empire State Building. I took a photograph from the Empire State Building and I put it on Instagram with some simple words to try and inspire. I didn't put on Instagram that I had a new seminar or a new book or a new DVD or anything like that. I simply said to my fans, here's something that I hope you can engage with that's easy, delightful, and simple. What I discovered was that it's very easy for them not only to support me by sharing this to their sphere of influence, but also to hire me. What you may not be able to read at the top in the back is that one of my fans, just someone who is not buying, who is not selling, just someone who follows me, not only shared the photograph with his sphere of influence, but actually put right in the sharing the last sentence, I can't wait to have you speak to my company. So not only will they tell you that they support you, but they will literally announce that they're ready to buy with you. And all you have to do then is close the sale. When it comes to creating delightful experiences for the future, the key is simple. Keep it easy. Make it high quality. Anticipate how they will enter the fast lane and open the experience to collaboration. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to your conference.